Today I'm recreating the awesome Audi R8 in 1/24 scale. Was it yet another simple and straightforward plastic model to RC conversion? Not quite. I've got plenty to talk about both with regards to the surprise successes and surprise failures of this project. In the end though, I think this car is both looking and driving great, so sit back and relax while I showcase my latest RC creation and of course take you all along for the ride. Hello everyone and welcome! I recently reached into the stash and decided to go ahead and put together this Audi R8 from Revell. With all the older American muscle cars and trucks that I've been building recently, I figured it was high time for something a little different. Mid-engined, German, and modern. Well, relatively modern I guess. This is close to a 20-year-old car now, believe it or not. As has been the theme for many of the recent projects I've showcased here on the channel, and some more that are coming up, this was a relatively simple and straightforward build, not involving a ton of custom design work or going all out with intricate details. I know from the perspective of you the viewer, the more ambitious or unique projects are what many of you find most interesting, whether it be trying to accomplish some sort of challenge or build something as lifelike and detailed as possible, often with a lot of small-scale engineering and design work along the way. Certainly fun to do, no doubt, but at the end of the day, I'm just a regular guy enjoying the hobby just like all of you, and not necessarily looking for every project to be some super involved, months-long all-out quest. That said, I do have some rather ambitious stuff slowly brewing in the background, so definitely stay tuned if that's your thing. Sometimes though, I just want to sit down, build a model, and then take it for a drive, which is exactly what I'll be showcasing today. Now, despite the relative lack of complexity or unique elements of this project, like with basically any build, there's always something to be learned along the way, and this here was certainly no exception. Of course, I'll be talking more about that as we progress through this video, but even the easiest projects can sometimes throw you a few curveballs. Now, mistakes and challenges aside though, overall I'm very happy with how the car turned out, and this kit ended up being a great candidate for a plastic model to RC conversion, as you'll soon see. I've said it before, but some of these models just seem like they were made for these types of custom RC builds, and I think that's definitely the case for this one here. Even without trying particularly hard, we still got a nice shallow interior and engine bay present, and this kit went together very well and sits nicely on top of this FPUC1 chassis. Just like with that 1970 Buick GS build that I showcased earlier this year, I wasn't planning on going into quite as much detail in this video as I do for some projects, although looking at the footage now, I did record quite a bit of the build process. I'll be highlighting some of the more unique elements of this particular project, while kind of rushing through some of the parts that I've showcased a million times before, like assembling the FPUC1 chassis. That said, if you've been inspired by this project and you want to build something similar, I will provide some links to the products used below in the description. Definitely check those out if you're interested in doing something similar to what I'll be showcasing here today. So with the introductions complete, it's time to fire up the 3D printer, heat up the soldering iron, and bring this 1/24 scale R8 to life. The Audi R8 was first introduced as a concept car in 2003, known as the Audi Le Mans Quattro, to celebrate the brand's success at the prestigious 24 Hours of Le Mans. The production version launched for the 2007 model year as a high-performance mid-engine sports car, the first mid-engine production car produced by the brand. Combining cutting-edge engineering with Audi's famous Quattro all-wheel drive system, the first-generation R8 came with a 4.2-liter V8, with later models offering a larger 5.7-liter V10. Widely praised for its blend of performance, daily drivability, and understated German design, the R8 quickly established itself as a serious competitor to more established names like Porsche and Ferrari, especially when considering its relatively low price point. Along with the addition of V10 power being optional starting in 2009, a convertible version, the R8 Spider, was introduced in 2011. In 2015, the second-generation R8 was launched with more aggressive styling, improved chassis dynamics, and a focus solely on V10 power plants. The gated manual transmission, favored among some enthusiasts, would be discontinued, emphasizing Audi's move towards more advanced automatics with more refined performance. Throughout its production run, the R8 remained a technological flagship for Audi, showcasing innovations such as the virtual cockpit digital display and extensive use of lightweight materials like aluminum and carbon fiber. This coming at a time, particularly in the 2000s, when Audi as a whole was both expanding and improving their entire vehicle lineup, shedding their reputation among some as being second-rate to brands such as Mercedes or BMW, and instead standing as a direct competitor. After nearly 2 decades of production, Audi announced the end of the R8, as the brand focuses more on electric vehicles. As a result, the R8 is notable not only as a high point in Audi's design, engineering, and performance, but also as an end to an era, presumably the final internal combustion-powered halo car for the brand. Model builders and RC enthusiasts interested in building a reduced-scale replica have plenty of options to choose from. In 1/24 scale, Revell has issued this particular kit that I'm using here numerous times since the car's launch, both in the original hardtop and later convertible form. 1/10 scale RC body sets and kits such as this TT02 from Tamiya are also available. Clearly no shortage of great kits to choose from, but let's go ahead and dive into this model that I'll be using for today's project. Looking for a relatively simple project to fuel my RC addiction, I reached into the stash and pulled out this kit that you see here. According to ScaleMates, this is the 2011 issue of this kit, which can be easily found for sale online, by no means a rare or expensive kit. As you can see, it's been issued a number of times, both prior and after this kit that I have here. Obviously, aside from the convertible variant, I don't think a whole lot has changed with regards to the parts that are included. I'm pretty sure I obtained this kit years ago as a part of a lot, and as you can see, I did start building it with some of the parts being loose and the body in primer. As you can see, the body looks very nice with some great detail, as do all the parts included in this kit. It's definitely one I would recommend. Just as always, make sure that you test fit everything before the final assembly. There are a few parts here and there that needed a little bit of adjustment, as well as a few minor flaws that I did the best I could to fix, but overall definitely up to the standard that I would expect from a modern Revell kit. A nice selection of decals are included as well. I took note of how the wheels went together and realized that if I could design my own parts that could go in the place of these rotors included in the kit, that would allow for the wheels and tires included with this model to easily be adapted for use with the RC chassis. As this build progresses, you'll see that this kit was very easy to modify to fit on the chassis, and I was able to retain details like the engine bay and interior without any issues, although obviously a bit shallower than what would be ideal. Regardless though, the modifications were very easy to do, so let's go ahead and get the chassis built and make those necessary changes. After having a thorough look at the plastic model kit and brainstorming some ideas, it's time to start putting this thing together. Once again, our FPUC1 chassis design will serve as the functional base for this project. As I've already featured this chassis in many videos prior, I won't go into too many details here, but essentially this chassis is a very basic, fully adjustable, easy to 3D print rear-wheel drive RC platform designed for plastic model to RC conversions like this. While unfortunately it won't be the best representation of the real-life suspension and drivetrain seen on a full-size Audi R8, I'll do my best to make sure that this chassis is at least out of sight when looking at the finished car. Maybe in the future, I'll design a chassis better suited for replicating mid-engined four-wheel independent suspension vehicles such as supercars or mid-engined sports cars. For now though, this FPUC1 from a practical standpoint will be perfect for this project after choosing the parts that best fit the wheelbase and width of this particular body. Our FPUC1 chassis can be ordered as a kit from our website, or you can 3D print the parts yourself. Links of course will be below in the description. Now like I said, I was intending for this to be a simple project with little to no custom work being involved, but the one exception that I made was designing and 3D printing my own set of brake rotors, which will allow the wheels and tires included in the plastic model kit to work with this RC chassis. This ended up working out really well and was just one of those instances where it makes you think this plastic model kit was just made for these types of custom RC conversions. As you can see here, the wheel is comprised of two individual pieces, which can be securely pressed into place on the tire. I designed my own brake rotor pieces going off of the measurements that I got from the parts included in the plastic model kit. I FDM 3D printed a set just to ensure that they were the correct size and will work how I intended, before later I'll be SLA 3D printing a set in resin. Once I cut off the excess axle shaft so there's just enough threads for those nuts, that outer wheel piece will be able to be put into place and the results should look great. I haven't needed to use any glue to keep those outer wheel pieces in place. They're a snug fit, but I can still easily pop that piece off if I need to access the nut behind it to remove the wheel. Always a bonus when you can make something easily serviceable. So far I'm on a roll with this project, and I expected the electronics to be no different, since I wanted to incorporate the exact same setup they've used 2 times prior now with that 77 Trans Am and that 70 Buick GS. I've been a big fan of this ESC as it's both compact and compatible with 2S and 3S LiPo batteries, allowing plenty of power to be sent to these tiny N20 size motors. Despite how rudimentary soldering together all of these electronics should have been, of course nothing can be that easy, and I ended up encountering an issue. As you can see, everything appears to be functioning just as it should. I plugged in the battery, the lights flash, the receiver connects to the transmitter, the servo works, and even when I move the throttle, the LED lights up accordingly. But unfortunately, no voltage is showing on the other side of the ESC, so there's no power going to the motor. I tried resoldering all the connections, and I even tried swapping out that first ESC with an identical second one, since I had 2 in total, but I had the exact same issues with both ESCs. I'm pretty confident at this point that I've got 2 defective speed controllers. I just don't see any reason why they shouldn't be working. I'm not exceeding the maximum voltage limit, and I've even tried using a 2S LiPo just to see if that makes a difference. I never had the same issues with the identical ESCs that I ordered prior to these 2, so it's looking like I got a couple of duds. Having a look through the reviews, it looks like I'm experiencing exactly the same problem as what this individual encountered. Now these are only a few bucks a piece plus shipping, so not a huge deal. I ordered these a while back off of AliExpress, so from prior experiences, probably not a great chance of getting any kind of refund or replacement. Now I do really like these ESCs, at least when they work, as they've been great for that prior Buick and Trans Am, and I understand that part of the gamble when ordering cheap stuff from places like AliExpress is that the quality and customer service can certainly vary. You win some and you lose some. Unfortunately, there aren't exactly a ton of different 3S compatible ESCs available in this size. I do have some more 2S and 3S compatible ESCs on order, although not quite as perfect as this one here, well, at least when it works, but it's something to have in the parts bin. I'll see what the seller has to say about these ESCs. Maybe I can get a couple of replacements or a couple extra thrown in if I decide to order some more. But regardless, in the meantime, for this Audi, I'll be installing one of our 2S LiPo compatible 10 amp ESCs. It might take up a little more space, even after I do some modifications, and it won't allow this car to run on 3S, but it's not a bad compromise. After a few hours wasted troubleshooting, I'm now finally getting back on the right track. Hey, that's just how it goes sometimes. Now, if you're using one of our 10 amp ESCs like I'm using for this project, understand we won't be able to send you a replacement in the rare event that this product is defective if you made modifications such as what I've done here. Crack it open and solder your own connections at your own risk, though of course please feel free to go ahead and test the ESC before any modifications have been made by using the plugs to ensure everything works as intended. The connectors are nice for convenience, but when you custom solder everything together, you can make it a lot more compact, as I've done here. I decided to place all of the electronics in the rear over the motor and axle. That'll leave plenty of room for the battery to be placed underneath the interior. A pretty tidy setup, all things considered, and the electronics should be just low enough for that engine bay to fit over top. So with the chassis now complete, I moved on to getting the model kit put together. I made sure that all the parts were fitting well and made any necessary modifications as needed, but overall everything fits together nicely from this kit with minimal effort being required. As you can see, there's a large engine bay piece that gets glued to the underside of the body, and with a little bit of sanding on the bottom, I was able to make it flat, which I could then cut and glue a piece of plastic to so you won't be able to see the electronics below. The upper part of the engine can then be glued to this piece, creating a very simple but convincing engine bay, with nothing more than a little sanding and trimming being required. While admittedly not much of the powertrain will be present below the intake manifold, one, or I guess technically two exceptions, will be the tailpipes. I just cut the ends off of the exhaust, which I'll be later gluing into place on the finished car. While the entirety of this flat chassis piece included with the model kit will not be used, I will be cutting off the front and rear sections, which can then be painted and glued to the body just as shown. So far so good, hopefully adding the interior will be no different. Some fantastic detail is present on this interior, so I wanted to try and retain as much of it as possible, while also leaving enough room below for the battery. I started by gluing the door panels and dash into place, and after that glue dried, it was time to do some hacking. I cut away at the interior so I can increase the height of the floor. I really wanted to retain that center console, so I made the floor just high enough so the battery can fit underneath, but the detail present on that center console is still there. After quite a few rounds of trimming, sanding, and test fitting, it was finally time to cut a piece of plastic to go on the bottom. This plastic is clear at the moment, but of course it'll get painted like everything else. If you're doing a similar project to what I have here, make sure that you're leaving enough room for the steering assembly. I had to do a little bit of trimming in some spots, but it all fits without too much compromise. Usually I'm doing this on the front of the car, but to ensure that engine cover stays in place while driving, I'm gluing in a couple of tiny rare earth magnets. If you're building just about any kind of scale RC vehicle, having an assortment of these tiny magnets can be very useful for all kinds of things. I'll be using magnets once again a little later to secure the body to the chassis. Of course, the interior is still going to need a few items before it's complete. It was at this point that I realized that what I thought was a complete kit, in fact was missing a few of these tiny pieces that go in the center console. Obviously one of the risks of getting started on a kit, but then putting it aside for a few years. I decided to go ahead and look through my stash of other opened model kits to see if the parts tree had been put into another kit by mistake, and after some time spent searching, miraculously it did show up. One of the great advantages that you all have when watching these videos is that I'm able to cut out all of the monotony and frustration that often occurs with these projects. But hey, while it might not have been as easy as it should have been, I did eventually wind up with all of the parts that I needed, so I went ahead and test fit everything, and of course cut the seats down so it'll be at the correct height with this now much shorter floor. Of course, while the shallow depth of this interior is once again a bit of a compromise, I think once everything is painted and put in place, it's going to look great. One of the more tedious and time-consuming steps of a plastic model build is ensuring all of the parts fit together like they should. Taking the time though to do any necessary modifications or sanding to each of the parts will result in a better looking car in the end, and less frustration during the final steps of the assembly when you really don't want to find out that something isn't going together like you want after the paint has been applied. Of course, building a well-designed and well-molded kit will certainly help in this department, but I've found that even some of the best kits out there sometimes could use a few tweaks, though not that much was necessary here. Another very important step, specifically for these plastic model to RC conversions, is to ensure that the front wheels have enough room to steer. After looking everything over, I needed to remove some material from this front section here. After that, everything was good to go. It's best to do this before the paint has been applied. Of course, I can't forget about the side view mirrors. Decals are included if you'd rather just glue the mirror into the housing at this stage of the build, but I decided to go ahead and paint these pieces separately. I don't mind tiny parts like these as long as they fit together well. Sometimes though, I do prefer to do as much assembly as possible prior to applying the paint. With this in mind, I did go ahead and glue a few parts into place, like these pieces that go in the interior. I've already had my fill of hunting down tiny parts for this project. It is important to give everything a quick wash, not only to remove dust from sanding, but also any residue that could be left over from the manufacturing process. I did end up doing a final round of sanding on the body, even though it had already been primered and was looking pretty good. Fortunately, I had zero issues with paint adhesion on this body, and any imperfections such as mold lines or flash had been removed. Finally, it was time to start laying down some paint. As usual, I simply used a variety of Krylon and Rust-Oleum spray cans like you would see at any hardware store, with the only exception being for the body, which I used this automotive touch-up paint. I picked up this can from AutoZone specifically for this project. This is the first time that I've used this U-Pole brand, but it seems just as good as the Duplicolor paint that I've used for some prior projects. As you can see, this is a General Motors paint color, so unfortunately, unlike with that Trans Am build prior, I won't be getting any scale points here with this Audi. In fact, this is probably borderline blasphemy right here. I didn't see any Audi paint colors at the parts store, though there were Volkswagen, so maybe that would have been the better choice for this particular build. Jokes aside though, despite having many different cans of silver at the parts store, which really to my eye all looked pretty much the exact same, unfortunately from a scale perspective, the flake here is too big. As will be typical with any full-size automotive paint, that metallic flake is just too large to look accurate on a car of this scale. It's not really a big deal to me personally, but if you want to go for the best lifelike appearance, you'll want to source paint specifically for plastic models, whether that be something that you can find in a spray can or something that requires an airbrush to apply. Now this paint did go on very smooth, especially after a clear coat. It was looking great. Didn't even bother to do any polishing. I sanded down that primer pretty smooth, so it turned out looking great. Here's where I did encounter some problems though. After allowing the clear to dry, I masked off the blades, which I wanted to paint black. I airbrushed some Rust-Oleum enamel, which looked fine, but after applying another coat of clear, it reacted with the black paint and started lifting, so off camera I had to carefully scrape off all of the black on the blades, scuff it up again, and then just lay down the black paint again. I didn't bother doing anything else at that point for fear it would react again. I've used Rust-Oleum paint for years, but despite doing the same thing that I've done in the past, it seems like I'm getting worse and worse results with undesirable reactions like this. I've tried applying the clear coat right after the paint, I've let the paint dry for weeks before applying the clear coat, and I still have issues. I have stuff that I've painted with Rust-Oleum from months ago that still feels tacky to the touch, and I could leave a fingernail imprint in it if I wanted to. Long story short, although I do like the availability, variety, and price of cheap hardware spray paints like Rust-Oleum, I'm getting to a point where I'm tired of dealing with all of these issues that I've never encountered years prior, and figured I'd just rather spend a bit more to acquire paint like this, which goes down great, dries quickly, and there's absolutely no drama, no issues whatsoever. Obviously, in hindsight, I wouldn't have used Rust-Oleum for those blades, and they aren't exactly perfect as you'll see on the finished car. Maybe in a year or 2 or 3, I'll check the paint to see if it's fully cured, and if it is, I'll go ahead and give it a good polish with a rotary tool and some compound to hopefully smooth it right out. But at this point, I consider it a lesson learned, and I'm just going to say it's good enough. The silver paint at least looks great, even without any polishing or wet sanding. By no means show quality or perfect, but as far as the builds I do, I'm very satisfied with it. The blades though unfortunately do detract a bit from the overall appearance. Enough complaining about the paint though. While those parts were drying, I turned my attention to the wheels. By this point, the resin brake rotor pieces that I printed were ready to be painted and installed. These pieces are both available as an STL file for 3D printing yourself on our Patreon, and we also have these parts listed on our website if you'd like to do a similar build with this model kit that I'm using here. Something important to remember though is that the opening on the wheel backs included in the plastic model kit are a bit too small to fit these rotor pieces. Due to the hex mounts on the chassis, I could only reduce the diameter on the backside of the rotor so much, so what I did was use a reamer tool to gradually increase the diameter of the opening on the wheel backs included in the kit, and then press the rotors into place, using a little bit of glue to hold everything together. And just like that, the wheels and tires included in the plastic model kit now perfectly fit the chassis. After a little paint, the wheels are ready to be installed. I wanted to dull down that chrome with a satin clear to make them look more like the real thing. However, if I was to do it again, I'd probably just spray them aluminum or silver rather than the clear coats, as they still look a little too shiny in my opinion. The rotors just got a quick coat of silver. I simply pushed the tires onto each wheel and then press fit the outer wheel piece into place. I didn't use any glue to secure those outer wheel pieces, as I haven't had any issues with them coming off while driving. It's now time to do some more detail painting by hand, starting with the windows. Initially, I wanted to apply some masking tape and then use a knife to cut away the areas covering the outer edges that should be painted black. However, I just couldn't see the sections that were supposed to be black after that tape had been applied. I'm not sure if they're available for this particular kit, but I know there are companies that will sell you pre-cut window masks that all you have to do is put them into place to cover the sections of the windows that you want to remain transparent. But I just went ahead and painted these areas by hand using either a Sharpie or some acrylic paint. Freehanding these sections is obviously not ideal, but all in all, it looks pretty good. The car is really starting to come to life now with these details being added. Next, I started applying the water slide decals. Again, as usual, Revell has included a great selection of decals, and they were very easy to apply, simply using some warm water. After those had been applied, it was back to some more detail painting, specifically on some of the smallest parts like the lights. Another hindsight moment, I think it's probably best to airbrush that transparent paint from Tamiya, as I noticed quite a few bubbles in some spots on the parts that I painted by hand. I thought maybe laying it down pretty thick in one go would be the way to do it, but maybe instead doing a number of very light coats and building it up would have looked better. Regardless though, not too bad overall. Another cool addition to this kit is that they give you some mesh for the air intakes on either side, as well as this piece that goes on the rear. It might look better if you leave these parts clear and then place the mesh over top, but I ended up both painting these pieces and then applying the mesh. It doesn't look all that different on camera, but in person it does help add a bit of texture and realism to these parts. Back to the body, I started hand painting a few final details, including adding some watered down black acrylic paint to accentuate the panel lines. These maybe turned out a little stronger than what would be ideal, but it does add a bit of extra detail and looks good overall. At this stage, it's finally time to start putting everything together, starting by installing the windows. I made sure to use some clear drying glue for all of the clear parts so I don't have to worry about any haze or other undesirable blemishes. There's a number of different options available. Mod Podge seems to be a very popular choice, and you can get what seems like a lifetime supply of it for between like 10 and 15 bucks. Your local hobby shop, craft store, or hardware store may carry this product, at least that's the case for me. Any excess glue can be wiped away with a wet cloth. Piece by piece, more and more parts were being added, gradually making this car look more like the real thing. A very satisfying stage of this project. Finally, I added the shallow interior and engine bay to the body. Once that glue dries, I'll be ready to secure it to the chassis. Just as I've done for many projects prior, rare earth magnets will once again be responsible for securing this body in place. I cut these posts down so the body will sit at the correct height, and then glued one set of magnets to the chassis and one set to the body, with the bottom of this shallow interior providing a great flat surface to glue the magnets to. Well, simple in theory, in reality I did have to tweak things a little bit. I had to add a few shims and re-glue some of the magnets to ensure the body was sitting level, side to side, and front to back. It's nothing that would impede the function of this vehicle, but I really want to get that body sitting correctly and looking as lifelike as possible. It may look a little sloppy down here, but it won't be visible in viewing the car from the outside, and it's well worth the extra effort to get the body sitting correctly. The side view mirrors are some of the last parts that I like to add, mainly so I don't have to worry about breaking them off while working on other parts of the body. With these final parts added and this Make It RC decal applied, this Audi R8 is officially complete and ready for its maiden voyage. The hours of work have finally paid off, and looking past some of this car's shortcomings, I'm really happy with how it turned out. Looking at this car from the right angle, it could almost be mistaken for the real thing. I'm a huge fan of this color combination. This silver with those black blades is what I remember seeing when this car was first introduced, and at least to me, this is sort of the quintessential color combo for these cars. It's too bad the paint on the blades is a little rough, but like I said, I'm really hesitant to do any cutting and buffing at this point for fear of making it worse. At this point, I think I'll just say it's good enough and consider it a lesson learned. As I said, the bodyline paint is probably a little stronger than what it should be. Maybe mixing up some dark gray rather than the pure black would look a bit better, or watering down that paint some more. That said, I do think it looks better with these lines than it would without them. The headlights and taillights turned out looking really nice on this car. You may notice a little white glue in some spots. Unfortunately, at the time of filming a lot of these shots, the glue had not yet fully dried, so you could still see some of the white residue before it had a chance to fully turn clear. Those temporary blemishes aside though, they turned out looking really nice. Of course, it's always great when a detailed interior and engine bay can be included, and for this car, the engine bay is pretty much a necessity since there's that big window over top. I do like the inclusion of the side windows in this kit. With those in place, it's hard to even tell that this is a shallow interior. Really, a lot of credit for this project has to go to Revell for producing a very nice looking model kit that was easy to put together. Although the FPU-C1 chassis might be lacking when it comes to scale details and not accurately replicate the Quattro all-wheel drive system of the real car, it's tucked away nicely thanks to the front and rear sections of the base piece included in the model kit fitting snug against the body. The low stance of the R8 also helps ensure that the RC chassis is nearly invisible. Contrast that to that 1978 Trans Am that I showcased earlier this year, where the higher stance of that car resulted in the bottom section of the chassis being visible. While functionally there's nothing wrong with that, as I've said before, lower stance vehicles like sports cars and race cars are best suited for the FPU-C1 if you want to ensure that it stays out of sight. Of course, a few things that this chassis is good at is being fully adjustable, easy to put together, and delivering reliable performance. It's quick enough on 2S, and there's no issues with any wheel rub. It's ready to tear up the racetrack. And there you go, another successful plastic model to RC conversion. Minor issues aside, I'm really happy with how this car turned out, and of course every project is an opportunity to learn something new. Don't let any minor setbacks get in your way, that's just part of the hobby. If you stick with it, in the end you can accomplish a lot. I think this Audi R8 has proved to be a great subject for an RC conversion, and I always enjoy learning more about these vehicles and really getting a better idea of the design throughout the process of building a model like this. It makes you appreciate the real thing even more. Building this car definitely makes me want to design a new chassis at some point, better suited for mid-engine vehicles such as this with a more detailed suspension and drivetrain. One thing at a time though, I'm still hard at work with some of our other chassis designs, which are receiving gradual improvements and additional variations. If you're into big rig trucks or 4x4s, definitely stay tuned for more updates on these platforms. But hey, what this FPU-C1 chassis might lack in scale details, it at least makes up for when it comes to versatility, ease of assembly, and durability, proving to be a great platform for a variety of RC model builds. If you're interested in doing a similar project to what I've showcased here today, again be sure to check out the links below in the description. Of course, I can't conclude a video like this without giving a huge thanks to all of our channel members and Patreon supporters for helping to make this content possible. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already to keep up to date with future videos. I've got some great projects and videos in the works that I'm super excited to share with all of you, and of course I've got some great videos posted here on the channel already if you're new and would like to check out some of the stuff I've built previously. With all that said, I'm going to wrap up today's video right here. As always, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.